Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Vishnu Prabhupada, Maharaj Radhikacharya, also C.C. A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Namacharya Haridas Thakur ki Jai. Prabhupada Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasti Gaur Bhakta ki Jai. Shri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopida Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki Jai. Navadup Dham ki Jai. Ganga Jamuna Tulasi Bhakti Devi ki Jai. Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki Jai. Go Premanandi. All glories to some of the devotees, all glories to some of the devotees, all glories to some of the devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Read from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 17, verse 22. Rajo Vacha Dharmam Bravishi Dharmanya Dharmo Si Vrisha Rupa Dhrik Yad Adharma Kritastanam Suchakasyapi Tad Bhavet. Translation. The king said, O you who are in the form of a bull, you know the truth of religion, and you are speaking according to the principle that the destination intended for the perpetrator of irreligious acts is also intended for one who identifies the perpetrator. You are no other than the personality of religion. Purport. A devotee's conclusion is that no one is directly responsible for being a benefactor or mischief monger without the sanction of the Lord. Therefore, he does not consider anyone to be directly responsible for such action. But in both cases, he takes it for granted that either benefit or loss is God sent, and thus it is his grace. In case of benefit, no one will deny that it is God sent. But in case of loss or reverses, one becomes doubtful about how the Lord could be so unkind to his devotee as to put him in great difficulty. Jesus Christ was seemingly put into such great difficulty, being crucified by the ignorant, but he was never angry at the mischief mongers. That is the way of accepting a thing, either favorable or unfavorable. Thus, for a devotee, the identifier is equally a sinner, like the mischief monger. By God's grace, the devotee tolerates all reverses. Maharaj Parikshit observed this, and therefore he could understand that the bull was no other than the personality of religion himself. In other words, a devotee has no suffering at all, because so-called suffering is also God's grace for a devotee who sees God in everything. The cow and the bull never placed any complaint before the king for being tortured by the personality of Kali, although everyone lodges such complaints before the state authorities. The extraordinary behavior of the bull made the king conclude that the bull was certainly the personality of religion, for no one else could understand the finer intricacies of the codes of religion. Translation, the king said, O you who are in the form of a bull, you know the truth of religion, and you are speaking according to principles that the destination intended for the perpetrator of a religious act is also intended for one who identifies the perpetrator. You are no other than the personality of religion. This introduces a very important concept. What is stated here by Parikshit is that the perpetrator of a sinful act should be punished. But also, the person who identifies that sinful person, he is to be punished, which sounds very strange, because in that case, if the king is punishing people and he's identifying, then he's also worthy of punishment, it seems. But we don't take it that way. We take it, this is we could say, a higher principle than the normal principles of justice. We see within Dharma, there's eye for eye, tooth for a tooth. It's kind of a universal principle. You harm somebody, you get equal punishment. It's logical. You kill somebody, you get killed. Capital punishment. You steal money, then you have to get money, equal amount of money taken away from you, whatever. So that's a regular principle. And somebody has to identify the person and protect people, etc. So the king and the kshatriyas are there to protect the citizens and make sure that those who commit the faults, they get the punishment. In this case, it says, well, the persons who are identifying the sinful people, they should also get punished. So that doesn't seem very logical from the normal point of view. So this is the higher point of view. Just as we have the regular principles of Dharma, etc. But then we have Jnana, which is higher. And higher than that we have Bhakti. So the principles are slightly different when we go to the higher stages. The vision of things is quite different. And in Bhakti, if we go to the highest stage, that of a Prema Bhakta, his vision is completely different from the person doing Sadhana Bhakti. It's quite different. He sees everything quite different. He doesn't even see demons anymore. So, in other words, we can speak from different levels of perception or consciousness, and then we'll have different sets of rules for these people. So in this case, Prabhupada in his purport nicely explains how the devotee sees sin and punishment, particularly for himself. So we take an example of a devotee and he has to suffer, let's say it's to suffer from somebody else. Somebody does something to him and somehow causes him pain or suffering or whatever. So then we identify the person causing the problem, and then he gets some sort of punishment. So that's the normal case. However, the devotee, on the other hand, is indifferent to the suffering. And he doesn't care to identify the immediate cause of the suffering, because he knows behind that there's another cause, and there's another cause, and there's another cause. And ultimately we get back to karma. And ultimately that means that the cause is myself. I caused something and I'm getting a bad reaction now in terms of this particular karma of that person attacking me. So then he understands, this is self-created suffering. I have done something wrong, therefore I get this result. And he learns from this that, therefore, I should refrain from doing such activities which cause such suffering. So this is actually the understanding of the law of karma. That's what the benefit of the law of karma is for human beings. They can understand how the law of karma is working and that they've produced their own suffering. Therefore, they should refrain from violence. So that is the lesson that the human being should learn. But particularly, it takes some insight and higher level of consciousness to appreciate that. So if one is in the lower gunas, tamagun or rajagun, the person cannot understand how this is working. The person in tamagun, when he sees somebody attacking him, he will attack back. That's it, finished. And if he can't do that, then he'll get somebody to punish them, or he'll hire somebody to do something to them, whatever. Someone in Rajagun, again, he doesn't see the ultimate cause, and he sees the immediate cause, And then at best he will apply for justice somehow and see that the criminal gets punished somehow or other. The person of sattva-gun is rather indifferent because he's not attached to his material body anymore. So he doesn't really mind if people cause him suffering or whatever, and nor does he hold a grudge against the person who's causing that suffering. And if he's on a devotional level, higher than that even, then he can understand that I've created this problem for myself, and therefore I'm getting the karma for it. So this is ultimately an arrangement of the Lord to teach me something. So that's how the devotee or someone in elevated sattva-gun will view his own suffering. So that's the sense in which we take this verse. The identifier of the sinful act, he also gets the same punishment as the sinful person himself, which means that we have to be very careful not to blame other people. Of course, we know there's practical things that we have to prevent, like violence, etc. But still, for ourselves, we refrain from simply identifying an immediate cause of our suffering. We take it back and we understand it is self-inflicted suffering due to our own ignorant position. And the value of this is we try to correct ourselves because of our particular weakness and problems. So in the Bhagavatam, it is stated that the true devotee, when he sees his suffering, he takes it as the mercy of the Lord, and he understands it is self-created. So in other words, it's karma. It may not be karma, of course, but he'll take everything as my bad karma, and I am the person responsible for all this. So he doesn't blame the other person, or he doesn't blame the circumstance, or he doesn't blame God, Krishna. Why did Krishna do this to me? I created my own situation like this. Finished. But what makes him a devotee is, someone in sattva-gun can have that position also, not being tolerant, etc. But the devotee, what he does is, apart from that, he doesn't blame the Lord. Rather, he continues as previously with his devotional activities, with the same devotion. He serves the Lord, and he does not interrupt his service to the Lord in spite of the fact of his own inconvenience or whatever. So in other words, he does not hold the Lord responsible for him at all in terms of his suffering. Rather, he is grateful to the Lord for a chance to learn something, and he continues his devotional service as before. And what's the result of that? Then Bhagavatam says, he is the person who gains the mercy of the Lord. He is the rightful recipient of the Lord's mercy. It's called a doya bak. He's the rightful inheritor of the Lord's mercy because of that attitude of tolerating everything in this material world and continuing his devotional service in spite of all the obstacles that may come. So in this way, the devotee's attitude is glorified. And then we have many examples of that. Prabhupada gives the example of Christ, and he tolerated his crucifixion, etc. Of course, we also have the case of Haridas Thakur. So he actually was tolerating all the beatings of the Muslim jailers or whatever they were. And on the other hand, he was sympathetic with them. He would say, oh, you must be getting tired doing all this by beating me so much. And he was compassionate to the people who were beating him. So, well, since you're beating me so much and you're getting tired now, then I'll pretend I'm exhausted and I'm going to die. But he in no way had any animosity towards his punishers. He just accepted everything as, this is Krishna wants me to do this, so I'm suffering for Krishna, whatever. So in this way, the devotee, Prabhupada says here, by God's grace, the devotee tolerates all reverses. This, of course, is the position of a very strong devotee. Those who are in a weaker position, who are not fixed in pure bhakti, who have and could have mixed bhakti, it would be more problematic for them or difficult for them to maintain this sort of stance. So we have the four types of people who approach Krishna. So we have the arta-arti and the arta, one who is suffering and one who wants to get some material wealth. And their good point is they surrender to the Lord and they start worshiping the Lord. The bad point is that their worship depends upon getting rid of their suffering and getting their money. And if they don't get rid of their suffering, they don't get their money, then they won't worship the Lord anymore. So it is conditional bhakti, conditional devotional service. Okay? In other words, these persons are devotees, but they're not the highest level of devotee, and therefore the strength of their conviction for worshiping the Lord does not continue if they get interruptions. But the person who is called the Jnani, the one who knows Krishna, is convinced of him, he continues his devotional service, and he doesn't care for getting things or getting relief from material distress. That's not his whole object and his goal in performing his bhakti, and therefore he doesn't expect those things. So if a devotee is practicing pure bhakti and he is steady in it, pure bhakti means that he is doing his bhakti without the motivation of gaining something or getting rid of his suffering. He doesn't expect that. So if he gets some suffering, it's not a problem for him. If he doesn't get wealth, it's also not a problem for him. Of course, if he gets wealth, it's fine, but if he doesn't get it, he's not going to blame the Lord because he has no attachment to getting things from devotional service, either relief from pain or material gains. So that's a devotee who's fixed in the process of pure bhakti. He's not 100% pure, but he's called a practicer of pure bhakti in sadhana, because it's only with such convictions and lack of desire for material results that he can advance to the highest level of prema. So this type of devotee is praised. He's not the highest devotee, he's just doing sadhana, but he's doing pure bhakti. So he is praised by the Lord. And therefore in Bhagavatam it is said he is the rightful claimant for the Lord's mercy. Others who are in a lesser position don't get that claim. We can say this verse therefore is particularly for the devotees of the Supreme Lord. This is the standard that they follow in relation to suffering inflicted on themselves. At the same time, however, we'll see that many places in the Bhagavatam and other devotional scriptures, among the qualities of the devotees is he doesn't tolerate the suffering of others. He's very, let's say, compassionate towards others. And we see the case even of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. They had one plague of some sort, maybe it was typhoid or some sickness, and everybody was getting sick, and he was one of the managers for the one of the kings in Bengal, Upper Bengal, and everyone was getting sick and dying and everything like that. And then somebody was describing to the king somebody dying like this, and then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he became so affected by that everyone thought that he was also sick and he was also dying from the same disease. He wasn't, but he got so affected by just hearing the description of all these people dying. So that illustrated the fact that he was very compassionate towards other living entities and very, very sensitive to their suffering condition. So in that case, if it's not just sickness and like that, but it is people inflicting problems on others, then what does the devotee do? And here it says, oh, we don't identify the perpetrator. We don't try to punish him. We don't try to do anything. Well, it sounds a bit peculiar. It's like a contradiction there. For himself, yes, the devotee takes that position of not caring. But for others, of course, then he will take some action. And we see that the devotee, he does not tolerate, when other devotees are offended, or when the Lord is offended by other people. He doesn't tolerate that. So even though the devotee is very tolerant and for himself, in terms of other devotees and the Supreme Lord, then he's willing to do anything for them. Okay? So this is the case not just only for himself, that he's taking this position of tolerating all the problems that come to him. So, therefore, in relation to other living entities, and particularly devotees, then he also tries to prevent all the suffering that is taking place. At the same time, we do understand that there's an ultimate cause of everything. So that is why Prabhupada often, he criticizes people who do charitable work. Now generally, of course, this is something that society likes, and if you do charitable works, then everybody praises you, praises your organization. So then they say, why don't you open hospitals, why don't you do this, whatever, do charitable works. But then we see that Prabhupada was not interested in opening hospitals. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur also was not interested in opening hospitals. And rather he criticized other missions for doing that. They were opening schools and hospitals. What is this spiritual organization doing? Philanthropic work like material punya. What is this? On the one hand, we say, yes, the Vaishnava is compassionate to everybody. So yeah, but the insight of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and Srila Prabhupada is that as devotees, we should understand the real cause of all that suffering, which is ultimately ignorance, rejection of the Supreme Lord, rejection of Krishna. So we should try to get, everybody, other people could do this, governments could do all this work, it's fine, but the devotees who have the higher knowledge, they should be concentrating on solving the problem by going to the root cause, that is ignorance of the jivas in the material world. Let's educate the jivas, try to get them to accept Krishna. And this will be the real solution to all the problems that are happening. So in other words, the devotee tries to identify the final cause, which is the jiva's refusal to accept the rules of the Supreme Lord. So that's why we concentrate on distributing spiritual knowledge as a solution to everything, rather than doing philanthropic works as our main purpose. They can be done secondarily, but not as the main purpose of our society. So in this way we can adjust our attitudes according to the situation. So this is an interesting point that is brought up, and we incorporate that into our individual sadhana. And at the same time, as I said, for practical purposes, society has to incorporate its system of justice, just as Parikshit also had to do that. In other words, he's identifying the criminal here as Kali personified. At the same time, he's making this statement, well, we shouldn't identify the perpetrator, and this is what Dharma was doing. He said, well, we can't say the cause is this, we cannot say the cause is that. The people say the cause is like this, some philosophers say that, or like that. And he never came to any conclusion who was causing his suffering. Of course, we know the direct cause was personification of Kali. But then, why Kali Yuga? Why that happened? If we trace it back, ultimately we say it's all the will of the Lord. We have 4 ages, and Kali Yuga is the worst age, and this is where Dharma gets destroyed. So, in one sense, it's the will of the Lord. But then we say, why is the Lord like people to suffer in ignorance? So the answer is not that the Lord wants that. Ultimately, we can, from the highly philosophical point of the Vaishnava, we can understand that why the ages degrade. So the mercy is the Lord restores everything to a very nice position in Satya Yuga. But the nature of material energy is it degrades gradually into Kali Yuga, into ignorance. So we can say, well, wow, why does the Lord have to arrange it like that? Why can't we just have sattva good in the material world? Everybody's sattvic. And the answer to that is the Lord complies with the nature of the jivas. And for Rajatamas in the material world. Because there are so many varieties of jivas with so many different desires. And they're a mixture. Some are sattvic. They have sattvic desires. But others have ignorance. Some have rajas. And they all have all sorts of mixtures in between. So the Lord creates all sorts of bodies for the living entities by various mixtures of the gunas. Why he creates so many bodies? Because each jiva has this individual mixture of gunas. Then they're not all sattvic. So according to the jivas, the Lord makes this sattva, raja, tamas material world, not all sattva. So it's the jiva's desire ultimately. So therefore this progression downwards into Kali Yuga is not because of the Lord, it's ultimately because of the jivas. Some jivas like this position, like personification of Kali and others. They like this position of lots of tamas. And therefore, the Lord gives it to them at a certain age, the age of Kali. The Lord is very merciful, so he makes it a short age. Only 430,000 years. And we have Satya Yuga. He makes it very long, 4 times as long. So, but nevertheless, jivas are there who really want their tamasic enjoyment. So he also supplies that in Kali Yuga for the jivas. So don't blame the Lord for this. It's ultimately the jivas. Nevertheless, jivas can change, especially human beings can change. Though it's also difficult, but still it can be changed. So this is also the Lord's mercy that he allows spiritual life to go on even in Kali Yuga. And through that, then there is hope for the fallen jivas of Kali Yuga. Again, they have to, it's their free will. They can choose or not choose to take it. Nevertheless, the Lord supplies this. So Lord Chaitanya has brought Nam Sankirtan as a Yuga Dharma. Those who want to accept can accept. And they can get out of this position. So that's where the mercy lies in Kali Yuga, with the movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Okay.
With the particular Ages Maharaj, with the particular Ages Maharaj, you talk about Kali Yuga, how it's a lot shorter. It just seems to get the impression that Kali Yuga is just jam-packed full of living entities just everywhere. They're on the planet and cities and overcrowded. Whereas Satya Yuga, even though it's 4 times as long, there seems to be hardly anybody populating the planet in Satya Yuga. Is that the right impression to have?
Oh, well, maybe that's the modern historical evolutionary thing. That we had a few cavemen scattered all over the earth and then they gradually got more populated and that happened. But if we take the version of Bhagavatam from the beginning of the day of Brahma, which is not just a yugas ahead, it was Manvantaras, whole cycles ahead at the beginning of the Manvantara period when Swayambhuva is there, he starts creating all the living entities. So we have all the living entities with all the human species and everybody, and Devatas and Rakshasas and everybody out there at the very beginning of the day of Brahma, what to speak of now. But there are times when we get more humans or less humans, and maybe more devas or less devas, and more rakshasas or less rakshasas, according to different periods. But we can say it's all constant in terms of the total number of living entities, because most of them are getting rebirth again, and not very few are getting out of the material world.
turn it up.
You have to go up. Totally up.
Sorry, up.
I have been to class, the last few classes. I don't know if the point has been discussed, but how is Maharaj Pariksit talking to the bull in this chapter?
Yeah. How?
Yeah, was it just normal in those days?
Well, no. Well, the bull is actually Dharma. In one sense, it's symbolic. Pariksit goes out to inspect his kingdom, and then he sees this bull who has got one leg, and the cow there mourning beside him, and then he sees the Kali personified beating the legs of the bull. And then this whole conversation starts. The bull, he asks the bull what happened, and the bull says, "Well, I can't say it's this, I can't say it's that. Why I'm suffering like this?" And then this is what the king says. So it's in one sense, symbolic. That at the beginning of Kali Yuga, we find that Dharma has 1/4 of Dharma is left, one leg is left, and that also is being eaten away by Kali Yuga. So end of Kali Yuga, there's 0 Dharma. And the earth is lamenting, which means the cow is lamenting, and therefore there's no more milk, there's no more nourishment, there's no more food left. So the more we have sinful activities, the less we have there on the earth to survive with. According to the adharma, then we get more problems on this earth and less sustenance. So then more people will die, obviously. That's the symbolic thing. The other, of course, is that, yes, cow and bull. So therefore Prabhupada often talks about in these purports about you have to protect the cow and the bull. So he takes it literally also that, in Kali Yuga, they have open slaughterhouses and they're killing the cow and the bull. So we have to protect the animals, and particularly the cow and the bull. So that's not so much a symbolic thing, it's an actual thing. As far as did this event occur and did Pariksit actually see Dharma personified as a bull and earth personified as a cow, we can't really say, but it doesn't really matter because we see in those times that we have devatas who made their appearance, which we cannot see now, and earth is a devata and often takes the form of a cow, and a devata can take many different shapes, just like Putana could take the shape of a beautiful gopi or whatever. Asuras can take different shapes. So devatas and higher beings can also take different shapes as well. So then earth deity could take the form of a cow, no problem. And Dharma, who's ultimately Yamaraj, can also take the form of a bull. And he does have a form of, I think he rides on a bull, Dharmaraj, he rides on a bull also. So, but not a problem for him to take the form of a bull, and they could have a discussion like this just to educate the people of the world. So it's at once symbolic, it's also, we can say it's also, the symbol becomes reality also.
This point of the identifier should be punished as much as the sinner, is that due to less intelligence and probably understanding the original cause?
Well, we can say like we call the fault finders, or the blamers, the backbiters, the people that just criticize everybody. He did this, he did that. They don't look at themselves as being also a problem. So we can say it refers to that people that just find everybody else at fault but not themselves.
And when we talk about the law of karma, is that Durga, who, like we could say the personification of the law of karma, can we say that's Durga Devi?
Durga Devi is usually identified with Prakriti, and Prakriti is kind of the substance, the material substance. And beyond the material substance, we get subtle things like karma and time, which are not exactly substance. They're like laws that govern the material world. They're called Jiva Maya, part of Maya, the Maya Shakti of the Lord, but not Prakriti, not the gross substance called Prakriti. Durga's in charge of that substance, more or less. So we have, of course, we can extend that and say, well, okay, she's in charge of time and karma also. Some people will probably accept that as well, that she's in charge of everything there, karma, time, and gross material elements.
So with Durga, we hear about the three-pronged trident, so that's basically the three kleshas
Yeah, possibly. Or maybe the three gunas, I don't know. the Shaktas, the worshippers of Durga Devi, have probably interpretations of all of her symbols, her club and her trident and her bow and arrow and her noose and whatever other weapon she carries.
Maharaj, so it's simple to see if you get punished if, please excuse me if I hear something mess up, just having to recall that. You can get punished if you see something simple, but yet if you're having to see something to protect someone else, is that still simple?
Do you mean say something or see something?
Say or see.
Well, you would see it maybe, and then you would say something.
Okay. Well, anyway, the identifying the perpetrator is the one thing. You see someone doing something, and then obviously he's doing a sinful activity, and then if you tell everybody this is a sinful person, then you tend to get the result also. But I'm saying that this does not apply in all cases. In normal dharma, even the king has to punish people, and he does so. And it's good. It's his punya to do so. He does a correct punishment of a sinner. That's what Parikshit's doing here. He's going to punish Kali somehow. But on the devotional side, for yourself, when we get things wrong with us, okay, are we going to identify or not? So the bull, he didn't identify. Who's causing you this problem? He didn't say Kali Yuga's doing it to me. Somehow it's just happening. And everyone will give a different cause, but we can't really figure out the cause, and ultimately maybe it's the will of the Lord to happen. So that's what the devotee thinks for himself when it happens to him. When it happens to other people, that's another case. But when it happens to him, he tolerates the situation and says, okay, will of the Lord somehow.
And maybe if you see something like that, maybe it's just telling the source where you need to say it, not to say it just to everyone.
Yeah, we have to be discreet on how we tell the truth or whatever. Yeah.
Thank you.
In relation to the concept that you mentioned about how everything happens because of the will of God, and even the yugas are there because of the will of God, but according to also the desire of the living.
Yeah.
From my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, by reading the Bhagavatam, actually God does not get involved in even the yugas or creating the bodies of the...
Yes, secondarily, obviously it's Brahma and Swayambhuva Manu and all these other people doing it, but ultimately they are empowered by the Lord to do such things. So Brahma gets his Shakti from the Supreme Lord, his power to do anything. He wakes up in the morning and he says, what am I doing here? What can I do? Then he has to pray, then he meditates, then he has a vision of the Lord gives him Shakti, then he's able to carry out his creation. Yeah. So ultimately it comes from the Lord, but it's indirect, obviously. Even Vishnu himself is like, as Paramatma, he's a little separate from the Jiva. If he's in the Jiva, he's still like neutral and he's just looking at everything. He's not trying to control anything there. But ultimately the laws are made by the Supreme Lord ultimately. So we have Prakriti under the Supreme Lord, we have time under the Supreme Lord, law of karma under the Supreme Lord. How did he get there? By the will of the Lord.
Yeah, but then by that logic, we could say that even serial killers are doing that because of the will of God, but in reality, it's all according to desire and karma, isn't it?
Well, yeah. So the rules operate in a negative way in terms of getting suffering because of the jivas. Their desires to enjoy independently, and they do sinful activity, then they suffer. So the laws are made to, we could say, restrain the jiva in one sense and educate them. But if they don't want to get the education, then they have to continue to suffer. So that's why they take birth after birth in the material world.
Yeah, because sometimes I see that in ISKCON people attribute too much responsibility to God, like everything is the will of God.
Nothing happens without the will of God, so therefore I hit the person, that was the will of God. Or no, that we can't say that.
So even if there is any imperfection in the material world, it will not be God.
It's our imperfection, or somebody else's imperfection. Yeah. Yeah.
And then in relation to, you said that if you define yourself in Rajati, did you say that?
Yeah.
Tamagun is...
Tamagun is really, they're so confused, they don't know what's happening. Tamagun.
Rajagun, you define yourself, and
Yeah.
Sattvagun, you just...
Well, probably Tamagun, they just react in the most violent way.
So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna advises Arjuna to act in Rajagun.
Well, within the laws of Dharma, he is a Kshatriya, a mixture of Sattva and Raja. So one says yes, but then if you have the laws of Dharma, the rules of Rajas are controlled to a certain extent. And then if you act according to those rules, instead of getting punished, you go to heaven. So you die on the battlefield through a righteous battle, then you get a heavenly enjoyment. So you get punya rather than papa. Yeah? So in other words, the laws of Dharma work with the gunas in such a way that if you follow those laws, in your tamagun, you don't get a tamagun result, you elevate. If you're in Rajagun, you elevate.
So is that only a king has a permission or a man or administrator? What about
For what?
just normal humans to react when they are attacked and everything? And they are
That's one of the laws that if somebody attacks you, you have a right to defend yourself. This is automatic
so
law.
not be Rajasic,
No, that's just natural. It's natural. It's a natural law. Yeah, yeah.
I have a different question. Prabhupada states the Lord of saying there's life in all the planets. What about all these pictures that they're still sending from Mars? Is that just another hoax?
Well, you can send pictures, but does that mean there's no life simply because our photograph doesn't pick up a life? Like we can take a photograph out here and we'll say, okay, there's trees and so many things. There's so many things in there that life we don't see. We don't see the viruses and the bacteria and all that also. And of course, what about the devas of the trees or whatever, the sub-devas, upadevatas of the trees or whatever? We don't see them also here, but they're there somewhere. The devatas of the mountains are there somewhere also. We don't see them. Even if we had special cameras, we could not take a picture of those things. So, as Prabhupada said, the upper planets are there, and even if you could go there physically with your body, you wouldn't see anything because you don't have the eyes to see that. You don't have the enjoyment, the body to enjoy Svargaloka on the moon. All you see is some dry rocks and some, whatever, cold. We had to put a spacesuit on to protect ourselves from the icy, temperature. So you need the proper body and the proper consciousness in order to penetrate into those spheres and appreciate that type of life. So in other words, other type of life we don't know about. We're familiar with our bodies on this earth with a particular constitution, earth and water and whatever. Devata bodies are different constitutions, so we can't even see them. We don't know where they exist even. Okay, Hare Krishna.